The question that I actually want to start this off with is, what is your price of success? What do you have to do? What are you willing to do? What do you need to do to achieve the goals that you want to achieve? That's what we're going to talk about today.
Please, like, I wonder how other people see life.
Question, you have to process it through your knowledge base, your whatever the fuck it is that you've gone through.
That's the universe telling you you haven't defined the next 5 years of your life. So I can tell you one time I was driving over the Fuller Warren Bridge going into Riverside for something. I can't remember what it was. It was when we had a year of nasty storms and there was 2 water spouts in the St. Johns River while I was going over the bridge. That is a core memory for me because I was like, dude, this is it. This is it, you know. This is not the way I want to go down by any means. An airplane would be cooler, you know, a robbery, you know, I don't know. So anyways.
Shit. Well, no, I haven't had anything interesting like that. There was a little twister tornado thing that happened here in Jacksonville specifically. It lifted up one car and dropped it, and I didn't see it. I saw it on like Facebook. I just happened to know the owner of the car, so it was really interesting. But other than that, I haven't seen anything crazy like that over here, man.
You know what's funny about you saying that? So we can go down this rabbit hole later on, but the fact that I've never met anybody impacted by a storm like that specifically, not to my recollection. Yeah. So then you could, you know, one always discusses conspiracy theories, right? So simulation theories is a conspiracy theory that's out there. Just for you to think about life a little bit differently, in my opinion. It's not necessarily that I believe it, but I do feel like sometimes that things are a simulation, and you got to control your own avatar. It's just a good conversation to go into one day, but. For you to say that and to say, hey, I know somebody that was impacted by a storm, you know, somebody like a freak of nature that just picked your car up and dropped it, whatever, you know, is crazy because Heather and I have always debated, like, we just don't ever hear any of these stories happening to us. So it feels like a simulation. It feels like life's algorithm trying to tell you something, right? So,
yeah.
And obviously it's not to say bad things don't happen by all means, but it makes you really think about life in a different fashion for sure. So.
No, this is a great kind of area to enter into, and not necessarily anything that we were going to talk about, but it's just like now there's so much more news than there is actual like people to people connection, right? Because this little thing happened. It was like, dude, it was like a little twister, dude. It may have been like 10 feet tall or something like that, but it was like a little beginning of a little tornado thing, and I saw it on the internet. Like I saw people sharing posts of the thing actually happening. It just turns out that when I was at Advance, the car belonged to a dealership that I used to service. Like I just recognized it from the video, right? So it's a dealership that I know. I know the employees there. I know the people that work there. I've had discussions with them. Like as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh shit, that's X place, right? But most of the time we see all the stuff on the internet. We don't hear it from other people. So this is true for me for a long time ago. Like I stopped paying attention to the news. Obviously, I haven't watched TV, like regular TV. I haven't had cable since I've lived in this house, and I've been here for 7 years, right? So I haven't watched TV. I haven't watched live TV or anything like that. So everything that I hear about when it comes to news-related things is usually from word of mouth from other people. Some of it's on social media. A lot of it was in person when I was interacting with, you know, like regular employees every single day, where there was more people around. That's when I would pay attention to something like, hey, if there's a hurricane coming, someone's going to talk about it, right? So it'll show up on my news feed. It'll show up somewhere. Like if there's important information, I will have a way of finding out. I'm not going to.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you think because of social media, that's why simulation theory has become a topic of conversation? To your very point, like we're all embedded in our news feed, so we don't see life happening through our own 2 eyes. We see life happening through a phone. Now, granted, I mean, I'm 34. I didn't really start getting into these conversations about life this deep for at least the past 5 to 8 years, right? So prior to that, social media was still a thing back then, early 20s. So yeah, I didn't really hear simulation theory then as a topic of conversation, but I also wasn't looking for it either, right? So law of attraction. So now that you're getting into all these theories about life and how people analyze it, where are we coming from? We can talk Christianity, we can talk simulation theory, we can talk all kinds of different theories, right? I haven't heard simulation theory as often until the past couple years, probably the past 3 years. And I just wonder, A, I could have chased that algorithm indirectly, right, through my feed, or B, the amount of time that people spend on social media, that since they don't see things happening, that's where you're starting to start looking through. You're looking through a phone screen.
Yes, I think the phone has a lot to do with it, 100%. But in terms of the actual thing itself, it's just part of, I guess, today's culture, right? Because obviously they weren't thinking about this in the 60s and 70s. It was a little bit different. Everything was a little bit different. They weren't thinking about woke. They weren't thinking about, the LGBT. They weren't thinking about all that crap back in the 70s and 80s. They may have on a different perspective, right? The exact details of what we talk about on a day-to-day basis is very different. So it's just part of life now. Right. This is what we as people are kind of discussing, what people are discovering. Back in the 60s and 70s, people were discovering other things. I don't know what the hell those were. I wasn't there. So it was just different.
Yeah. I mean, you had invisible lines of things that you didn't talk about back then that were discussed as what's a good word? Like just stay away zones, right? There wasn't a lot of open dialogue back then. There was a lot more of a I don't want to say moral or value based conversation either, because I think that's subjective based upon somebody's point of view, right? I mean, you did have a lot more values back then from a family perspective, but some of the values that were then and versus now were unhealthy values, right? People weren't talking about the things that you referred to only because there was a healthy line that people didn't want to cross because they were scared to cross them, right? So I'm like you. I don't really watch the news, dude. I haven't really paid attention. Occasionally when I say occasionally, probably once every 6 months, it seems like I'll go down the news trail just for a second, just to see kind of what's going on out there, because that does impact, the stock market a little bit. It does impact the real estate market. So it's not for me necessarily caring about, the political landscape or the news landscape. It's more or less just to see how that influences day-to-day life, right? And it doesn't have a heavy influence for me personally, but it does have a heavy influence on the rest of the world and how they see, it being ran. So, yeah, it's all garbage. Truthfully, I hate it. I don't know. I was talking to someone about it the other day as well, and I felt like I'm getting trapped more because these fucking text messages about political landscapes, from either Kamala or Donald about some bullshit, and I've never seen more text messages come through my phone than I have now versus the past few elections. So I'm in it a little bit more on accident than I want to be, but I don't really care, nor am I voting. I don't believe in it. Heather and I were talking about none of all that does is impact the plan that I use, right? From a political perspective, what plan am I going to run down in order to reach my goals, left or right? So these elections mean nothing to me personally, other than what road am I going to travel to be successful? Because I'm not going to use that as an obstacle, I guess. And that's where I feel like a lot of people get trapped talking about these type of things, political, conversations, conspiracy conversations, is a lot of them are used not to be stoic or neutral in the conversation, but they're used for more of an excuse as to why they can't reach their destination, right? So that's what I find absolutely stunning and mind-boggling, is the fact that people will literally blame a political atmosphere for their lack of success. And it just drives me crazy, man. It drives me crazy.
You know what's really going to drive you crazy?
What?
The smooth transition we're about to have right now. You ready? So
go.
You mentioned that in the previous years of life, there was a lot of hush-hush. There was a lot of family culture that was not thought about. There was a lot of family culture that was not questioned. There was a lot of things that just were the way they were because of the environment that you were raised in. Exactly what I want to talk about today. So it's going to be a perfect transition. I need to think more.
What do you mean?
Exactly. So I feel like I need to box myself into a room. Think about this, just like a room, an old classroom. We're talking something along the lines of the trailer that was out back for the driver's ed course. There's nothing in it. There's no point in it being there. An isolated room with a little desk in the middle with a notepad and a paper. And I just need to sit there and think, because over the last few days, I've been thinking about personally my family rules, my family standards, just the the aspects of life that we don't spend a lot of time actually thinking about, right? So there's a lot of rules as we grow up that are kind of set by society. And I say rules, but like standards, if then type situations, right? These are what guide us, right? If you want to be successful, you have to have a good set of rules. We have to have a good set of standards. A lot of the times as individuals, this is handed down. For example, my parents and their parents on Sunday would wake up and clean the house. The house gets clean. We don't travel unless the house is clean, right? That's a rule that was set by my parents. But I don't necessarily follow that same exact structure. There's a lot of other things that have to do with waking up, going to sleep. How do I account for certain things? How much time do I spend with the family? How much time do I spend on myself? How much time do I spend processing stuff in the morning? These are all things that I need to think about. So I've realized over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks that I need to spend so much more time thinking, breaking down life, breaking down my whys, breaking down what I want to do, how I want to do it, who I want to become, and actually thinking about it. Because a lot of the times it's just like it really is handed down and you do have desires, but the work actually comes from that isolated individual thought, that moment that you spend processing, visualizing, understanding what you want, and putting a plan to get there. Is it going to be perfect? No. Do you know what you're going to do? Not 100%. But I need to spend a lot more time in that box processing information.
You know what's insane? Like, I was there a few weeks ago, and I actually wrote something down in my. I carry my, you know, my little book, dude. I fucking carry this thing around all the time, and I just put random thoughts in it, right? And that was actually one of the things I wrote down this morning before we even started talking. Not in the same aspect of what you're going, but I like where you're going. But in the sense of like me trying to reframe my morning, I think a lot of that comes down to, like we've talked about, environmental shifts, right? So there's a whole nother world out there that we have never seen, right? Because we just see what we've been grown to see based on the environment that we were raised in, the area that we were born in, the school that we go to, the side of town that we live on, your parents' point of view, your family's point of view. So that's all you've ever seen. And I guess the thought that I was having the other day more specifically is like, I wonder how other people see life. Like, how do they see family values, family rules? What do you do? What do you not do? What days do you do it on? Just these small innocuous things that we take for granted that we do that are almost automatic for us, right? Just from that piece of life that's become autonomous. I was thinking about the same thing a few weeks ago. Just trying to not necessarily undo them, but question them. Why am I doing this? Because a lot of it comes down to like, I don't want to say a guilt feeling, but there's like a feeling inside of you that when you do something, you feel good or feel bad, right? Or you feel neutral. And it just comes down to the rhythm, how you speak to your children, how much time you allocate to your children, how much time you allocate to yourself. Do you give yourself dedicated time to where you can be quiet and talk to yourself in your own mind, right? How do you use your drives if you're on a long car ride? Like most people complain about them. Oh, I got to drive 2 hours, 3 hours. I'm like, that's the time that I get to myself, that I think about life, or that I'm grateful for life, or I put like, TV commercials on in my brain where I can analyze those conversations with myself. So I'm right there with you, dude. I think we could talk about this for a little while, just because I'm in a place in life where you're also trying to create your future from a law of attraction and manifestation perspective, right? So the question more specifically that I was writing to myself, and I wrote it down a couple of days ago, I think it was actually a week: reflect, analyze, compromise, but don't surrender. And I know that doesn't sound like it's connected, but the interpretation in my mind was the reflect, analyze piece, to where you could really look at, and I've been telling the kids lately, I know it sounds funny, but I'm trying to like relate to them, movies on different pieces of life that you're trying to grow in them. I think it's easier to paint a picture. And the thing that I've been referring to most frequently is the multiverse, right? So that's what I call it. Is everybody has their own version of life, and they all see the world differently than what we do. There's similarities and there's things that we all can agree on that we see probably the same way, pretty close to it, but no two views of the world are alike, just because environments that we've been raised in, right? So I've been trying to describe that to them as of late, and other people, but there is a multiverse, man. Like Marvel's accurate 100%. The multiverse definition is subjective based on how we see it, right? but it doesn't necessarily have to reflect Marvel specifically. But the way you see life and the way I see life are two separate fucking angles, and I'd love to understand what that looks like.
You know what's really crazy is I was actually thinking about something like this, not exactly in that sense and not to explain it. It was just like a random thought that popped up. But the truth is, in terms of the way that I kind of process that information, is that everything's true to everyone. The only thing is your truth and someone else's truth are not the same. So, for example, what I believe can be different from what you believe, but both of our truths are true to us, right? So it's our opinion, like our thoughts are what make life true to us. Like whatever you believe, that is 100% true. So it is opinions, but in reality, like my truth is my fact, your truth is your fact, but those two things may not be the same. So just like literally the way that people have different opinions, personal interactions, just where you begin to see that. Because someone can tell you something, they can believe it wholeheartedly, and you can 100% disagree with it, right? Someone can say, shit, I can't think of something right now on the spot. The easy one, like the thing that we're talking about with politics, right? Someone can believe like, hey, if Trump gets elected, the country's going to go to shit, right? One person can have that belief, that be true to them. And then another person can say, if Kamala gets elected, the country's going to go to shit. They both believe the same thing of two different people, and both of those are true. There is a genuine fear behind whatever it is that they're saying, like that, but it's two different things.
And that goes back to the argument that there is no right or wrong, and there is no good versus bad. There is no good versus evil. It's all anecdotal, dude. Because if you're, and why do you think scientists? So I just remember this from years ago from science class, dude, where you had a hypothesis, right? And you had it was an educated guess. So you can find scientists, and Heather and I have this argument all the fucking time, dude. And you can find truth in any topic of conversation that you want, because there's always going to be multiple points of view, and you can find somebody to argue both sides of the coin, saying that they're accurate or they're fair or they're good, right? It's no differently than liberal versus conservative or good versus evil. Like there's always somebody who can give you an alternative point of view or perspective and define it. And as long as you do the research and stay stoic behind it or very neutral, you can see both sides of the field, right? But most people, they research to find evidence supporting their case or argument of why they feel the way they do. And if you look hard enough, you're going to find plenty of information that will define and support your case and your argument. No differently than a person from an opposing point of view can find the same information supporting their argument as well. And really, you're trying to debunk each other, but nobody's looking at it from an objective point of view, saying, okay, there's truth in that answer and there's truth in that answer. But there's no real data. You can always find an algorithm. Somebody's always going to be smart enough to create a mathematical equation or an argument that is going to support the opposing view. You just got to look hard enough. And most people don't see it that way, right? They're just like, no, it's this person is going to be better for us. No, that person, or hey, no, this is wrong or this is right. And I'm like, if you want to research whether this is accurate or not, you're gonna that's where you can go to conspiracy theories, man. There's some conspiracy theories that are accurate. That's why they exist, right? But you could always find something that leads you down that rabbit hole, and it's just a waste of time, dude.
The beauty of statistics.
No, you're 100% accurate, my friend. That's what I tell people all the time. Like, I'm not a smart person. I don't want to be a smart person, because when you become super intelligent like that or super intellectual like that, you go down a path that you can't come back from, in my opinion. Like you're going to support somebody. Very few people from a human perspective can stay non-emotional to something, including myself. There's many things that I can stay pretty stoic on or neutral on, and there's many things that I get emotional on. And I'm working through that. I'm super self-aware about it, right? So it takes time for me to process that. But that's, most people are arguing from a point of view that they can't let go of. Families, values, stuff like that. Like, you try telling your parents something that's inaccurate, or you're explaining something from your point of view, they're only going to see it from their point of view, right? I don't know. I haven't met parents that are super, and they're out there, right? I'm not saying my parents are bad by any means, but most of the time when you criticize somebody, they take it personally, right? They don't say it and say, "Oh, that's a great point of view, Kirk. Let me change my mindset on that," right? Very few people I've ever met that said that.
No, it's true, 100%. It's fucking hard, bro. It's hard to separate yourself from someone else whenever you're giving an opinion, right? Because the way that someone asks you a question, you have to process it through your knowledge base, your whatever the fuck it is that you've gone through, and then you have to spit that back out. But a lot of people don't actually think about what's best for this other person in this situation that has nothing to do with me, right? It's always like, this is what I would do in that situation, but that situation is not you, right? You know, for example,
Oh,
like you enjoy
dude,
the Yankees. I think the Yankees suck. You're going to get emotional. I don't give a shit.
I won't get emotional at all when we're in the ALCS right now and you're sitting at home. So
see what I'm saying?
It's okay.
But no, seriously, it's just like it's hard to give feedback on something that you really don't know something about, which is why, interesting, the greatest feedback has never actually been feedback, right? When you think about the fucking Yoda, when the Yoda advice, it's not about his experience. It's just like, hey, you'll figure it out, or hey, think about this, or hey, what do you think about this? It's always questions, right? Because the person asking the original question is the person with the answer. So when it comes to mentorship and it comes to leadership, and you know this, you may not have that answer that someone's looking for. But knowing that is the hard part. Knowing that is self-realization. Knowing that is where the battle is won, I guess.
So what brought you down this that question? You gave a very vivid picture in terms of how you're articulating this to me. Like, you picture the trailer in the back of the driver's ed course, free and with nothing in it. So like, you went down this for a reason. I want to hear this. Like, how'd you stumble on this? Why are you questioning it?
Well, first off, I thought about this because we had to have this conversation. So I thought about it. But the other thing is, like, there's a lot of actions that I take on a day-to-day basis that are not getting me in the direction that I need to go. I need to eliminate those things.
Give me an example.
Honestly, consistency. Like, for some reason, there's something in me that I have yet to figure out that is fucking fighting the direction that I want to go. Right. So right now, there's the actions, the thoughts that I need to take to get to where I want to go. There's the previous version. I genuinely need to let go of the previous version, and I have yet figured out what the fuck I'm holding on to, bro.
Okay, so lack of
I need
consistency.
to sit down and think about it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's one of those things that I need to sit down and think about. I literally have like a page right here next to me where I sat down last night and I just wrote all of the questions that I need to answer, right? Because there's a lot of things that I haven't actually sat down and thought about. I haven't thought about a like specific why or a specific like reason for a lot of things. Like, what are my personal standards, right? This was the big question that kind of started it to me, is what are my personal standards? I have standards that were set by society. I have standards that were set by my parents. I had standards that were set by my environment. Do I fully agree with all of those? What are they? Can I stick around? Do I need to add anything else? There's so much processing and so much time that I need to spend thinking about all of this shit to move forward, but literally to move forward, right? What is it that I need to clarify on the path forward? Like, I'm at a point where I understand where I want to go. I genuinely feel like my knowledge base, I genuinely feel like the person that I am, the information that I have is enough, right? Like, I don't think I need to gather more information. I don't think I need to read more books. Will I in the future? Absolutely. But I don't think reading another book is going to get me where I want to go, right? I don't think that sitting down and listening to more information, listening to more podcasts is going to get me where I want to go. I genuinely think that I'm at the point where I just need to sit the fuck down and take action and figure out a goddamn plan.
Oh, dude, I just wrote that down. I just wrote take action. So it's so funny. Like, this is where I probably felt like I was at a few years ago. And you have to look at a couple different things. I think you're right on because I've had these similar questions to myself. Dude, I've read so many books and heard so many podcasts where they become the same. Like, you just start tuning yourself out because everything it's the same terminology, the same enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm, whatever it is, right? So there's a couple things that I just wrote down real fast. I wrote down consistency because you keyed that word. Personal standards. I wrote personal standards down. I wrote down expectations. This is a critical one, and you're going to go left field on this one if I had to guess, but I want you to hear me out. expectations of yourself and where you should be at and where you want to be. Three separate questions you have to write down, and you have to remove expectations from yourself. Expectations are created by an external environment like your parents, your family, the TV, social media, people that you've watched, followers, podcasters, influencers, shit like that. They create an internal expectation that you're unaware of. It's a subconscious expectation piece, and until you can remove that from yourself, you're going to constantly feel like you're chasing something. So that's just a topic of conversation that you'll have to journal through. And you could disagree with me for a second because you may not feel it right now. And I'm just throwing it out there. But when I removed the expectation from external factors outside, I felt 10 times better. Like, because you see a lot of things subconsciously where people are moving faster, like people your age are already successful at the goals that you want. And it makes it hard to keep up with them because you're to your point, you're doing the right thing, you're saying the right thing, you've got the knowledge that's necessary to grow. The thing that you're missing, other than the expectation piece, you already said it, is just you got to take action somewhere. And it's funny that you have that, as I actually have that as the background on my phone is always take action. So I don't have any expectation of what that action should look like in terms of trying to compare myself to like other YouTubers or influencers or whoever it may be. I've removed that and let go of that, right? And that's why I've removed myself off of social media, because I think that plays a big impact on your brain until you can clear that shit out. But the other side of it is, dude, like taking action is anecdotal. It doesn't need to be, I'm going to take action to make a multi-million-dollar decision tomorrow. It's all the innocuous things that you do or don't do every single day that you have to question whether or not you're taking action on or not. Right. So like, hey, if there's something that comes across your plate that's really, really tiny and you're like, I got to make a phone call, you got to take action on it. Like, sometimes you'll push shit away, you'll push shit off. And those are the things that lead up to the next thing, that you fast forward 5 years later, bingo, you're right where you want to be at. Right. Because I think the other side of it, and the thing that just popped in my head that I feel pretty powerful on, when we were struggling, at least for me, when I was struggling 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right? I would probably say more 10 years ago than 5 years ago.
Can you define struggling before you continue?
Struggling personally, mentally, financially, right? Like we weren't right up here. We weren't self-aware.
No, I got it. I just like, someone's going to listen to this and be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
No, I'm glad you asked me that. So when you look at self-awareness, like being truly self-aware, personal development and growth, when you look at financially, like where are you at financially doesn't match what you're thinking about. It's not congruent with up here and up here, right? And down there, not up here. But anyways, when you're not congruent with those things that you want to cultivate the growth you're trying to look at, that's what struggling is for me, right? So 10 years ago, when I wasn't self-aware, I still had the victim mentality on life and external factors, and just shit was crazy. You start to think through the next 5 years or where you want to be at. And that goes back to that cliche saying that you see on social media a lot, is like, you are where you were where you were thinking about 5 years ago. Be grateful for that, right? So here's the crazy part though. So that's easily understood, right? So then you start to become self-aware. You think about where you're going to be at in 5 years. You plan it out, dude. I kid you not. I read a book of law based on the law of attraction. So I thought through my goals, and you and I have had this conversation. I was going to make X amount by 30, X amount by 40, stuff like that. But going into the law of attraction piece, like I even planned my house. Like I knew what type of house I was going to live in. Like I got that deep into it. 5 years later, I made it there. I was in North Carolina at the time. All right. So then you start thinking about the next 5 years. All right. So boom, 5 years later, I literally just crossed my 5-year mark with the organization that I'm working for right now. I'm here. So the reason why you feel the way you feel right now, is because you may or may not, I'm just speaking for the crowd. Whenever I feel like this, I don't know what my next 5 years are going to look like. That's when so that year or that 6 months that you feel like this, that's the universe telling you haven't defined the next 5 years of your life. That's when you become paralyzed on accident by complacency, where you're like, I made it, I'm good. And then you get stuck into that normal skip of life. So that's when I'm like, holy shit, it's been 5 years now. I need to start thinking about where I'm going to be at in 5 more years, because I haven't thought that far ahead of my time. My whole past 5 years has been working for the goal of where I'm at today, and then visualizing this manifestation law of attraction piece. So for me now, and I'm here, so I'm right with you, is what are these next 5 years going to look like? Heather and I have been having this conversation a lot in the past few months. trying to define that, where we're going to be at, what do we want out of the next 5 years. Abigail just turned 16 today, which I find super crazy that I have a 16-year-old at 34. But we're in a really good spot, and I love it, right? So there's a lot of different things that I think you have to look at. So for me, it just goes back to expectation, personal standards, consistency. But last but not least, dude, you got to start taking action. So like you got to figure out where you want to take action at, I guess. That's the question you have to ask. And I think you're already journaling in it, right? You're starting to ask yourself those questions, and you're going to gravitate towards those questions that you want answered.
Yeah.
And you'll disregard the ones you don't.
I have them down. I literally need to sit down and do the work, but it's really interesting because like the way this got started with me, I was listening to, I don't know, it was like a YouTube video, I'm pretty sure. So anyways, either way, somebody was discussing that they had heard of Tony Robbins. He tells a story about a day that he went out to the beach in California and literally just like started fucking running and he just took off and started running. He spent like the whole day at the beach. He just took off running. And throughout that, after he stopped running, he started thinking about what it is that he wanted in the future in terms of manifestation and believing in it, saying it, and becoming that, right? So there was that section of thing that happened at the beach, and someone else literally was like, hey, I read this portion of the book, and I was like, you know what, I want to do that. And they went and did the same thing. And in my brain, when I heard it, because I heard the story first from the stuff that I was doing with Tony Robbins, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know why the fuck he would do that. And then someone else did it, right? And this other person has some sort of level of success. And I started thinking about it. I was like, holy shit. Out of all the people that I know, I don't know this person, right? But this other person ended up doing it and they had a level of success. Why the fuck did they do that? Right? What does that?
What inclined them to do it?
Yeah. What brought them to do it? Like, what's the situation? What's the thing that you discover? And simply just kind of thinking through that, I was like, well, they sat down and thought about it. How much times do you actually sit down and think about that, right? As you go through the day, your day gets full of shit and activities, and there's not a lot of time to think, right? And that's where my I need to think more comes in, because a lot of the times I end up getting into a portion of life where I think it through and I understand what I'm doing, and I understand what I'm doing when I wake up in the morning and I do this and I'm on point. And throughout those days, everything kind of seems to be, flowing on the up and up. Something happens at some point, and this is part of what I need to figure out as well, is at what point does the distraction come in? At what point does the level of slack or the level of thought or the level of intent on what I do throughout the day, at what point does that slip? But I still have to sit back and think about all of those things. So like seeing this story and seeing someone else talk about the story and the fact that they took action on it is like, I started thinking about the shit that people say, right? The things that successful people say. I don't have a very good example, but a lot of the times when you hear someone talk about something, right? And you go, oh, I've never thought about that. They did. Someone sat down and thought about whatever it is that you just said, I never thought about. That's why they're ahead, because they did that thinking. They did that work. So if someone has a process, if someone has an answer to a question, and someone has a knowledge of themselves in some way, shape, or form that ever makes you as an individual feel as though you haven't done that work, you haven't done that work. They're there, they're saying what they're saying because they actually thought about it. So a lot of the times, like I feel like a lot of this stuff is ingrained through environment, but in reality, you have to sit down and actually think about it. Right? Like if you ask me what I want, I can't just answer that question and give you like a nice thorough answer unless I actually think about it. Right? I can't tell you my thoughts and opinions on thoughts and opinions unless I actually sit down and think about it. And a lot of the times you will give a generic answer, but it's a baseless answer that doesn't have any actions or correlation to what you're actually doing in life. But when somebody actually gives you an answer and integrates it into their life, they actually sat down and thought about it. That doesn't happen.
I mean, you're 100% accurate. People don't stop and question certain things. I think that there's also, you could tie this into another conversation. Whatever you're going to think about, like this is, again, another point of view, but I think about that a lot in terms of just overall passion with what you're thinking about. If you become super passionate about something, you're going to question. When you think about the Wright brothers and flying, and people told them it was impossible, they thought about it and they made it happen. but they were very passionate about that, right? Same people from a car perspective, whatever you want to look at from an invention perspective. They thought and they put every fiber of their being, every ounce of energy into that particular conversation with themselves, with that thought of what was or was not possible. So I think where you're, and again, I'm going deep into something like a deep cut here, but I feel that same way about certain things. And then there's other things that I'll get deeply involved in, and it just comes down to like what you're very interested in and what you're not. So otherwise you're not going to stop and question anything. Now the root or the other side of that would be you're never going to become passionate about something until you start to question everything, and then one day you're going to ask yourself the right question about something, and it may be when you're 35, it could be when you're 55, and then you're gonna be like, holy shit, and that's going to unlock a box that you're going to want to be deeply involved in. And you'll find that passion, right? So there's two sides of point of view right there. I think about that all the time. You just got to find out. I don't have expectations on when that's going to happen. I think, and I've been okay with that. But it's not going to stop me from trying new things that I'm interested about, or things that I'm not interested in at all. I've been trying to be a little bit more looser in that. Like, I'll give this a shot. I'll try that. I'll try this food. Like random things. Again, tiny, innocuous, but stupid example, I started eating onions a few weeks ago. I have no idea why. Now, granted, they're only the red onions. They're not the white onions. But like I randomly just thought, I'm going to give these a shot. And I did, right? Small, trivial. Glad I made that change in my life because they're fantastic. But I'm doing little tiny things like that to try new things because I don't know what the next chapter is going to look like, right? And I know that sounds silly, but I question everything now like that. I'm gonna give that a shot. I'm gonna give this a shot. I'm gonna think about this a little bit more. Shit, I'm gonna start hunting this year. I'm not a hunter. Do I look like a country guy? No, I don't even own a piece of camo, right? And I said that to somebody the other day, and they're like, "What? You don't even talk about stuff like that. I would never have guessed you were gonna go hunting." I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Got my hunting license. Got my certificate of safety. I got to go buy some camo and some fluorescent orange and work on my twang, but I'm going to give hunting a shot in a few weeks. Why not? Fuck it." Right? So
it's fucking hilarious. No, but I get it. So everything has an appeal to a certain extent. And I get it. You're at a point where I guess new experiences are valuable to you. Whereas, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, those weren't the things that you were chasing. So I 100% get it. But it's true though. Like, how do you know you don't like it until you try it?
100%. I asked my wife that question yesterday. She said, we walked into Wawa and there was like a cherry Coke Oreo flavored. And she's like, gross. And granted, we don't drink a lot of soda in our family, right? Like very rarely. But I'm like, she goes, that's gross. I'm never going to try that. And I said, don't knock it till you try it. Can't say it's bad until you actually try it. No, it's bad. I'm like, no, it's not. You've never tried it before. It could be fantastic, and it could be the next best thing that you missed out on your entire life. You don't know, right? So trying to have that point of view in everything that we talk about and questioning yourself in everything like that, similar to what you're doing. And I know I went down a weird path with it, but I was just trying to paint pictures. I think asking yourself questions on what you should and shouldn't expect of yourself, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, what's a fair timeline for yourself to get to that goal, and start moving the needle a little bit, dude. Right. But everything you're going through is fucking normal in a mental space for sure. Not trying to make this a therapy session by any means, but
no, not at all. It's just literally what I'm going through, right? Like you asked me why I asked that, and that's literally the thing. That's what I'm thinking about now, right? So I've achieved from a previous perspective, like I've achieved to a certain level, I guess a level of income that I was comfortable with. I've achieved a situation that I was comfortable with. I've achieved a level of freedom that I was comfortable in. But like, how do I lock that down, right? How do I make sure not to worry about it anymore? How do I put myself in a situation where another thing that kind of triggered it, and I guess we can kind of finish off, but I was watching something the other day, and this was like, shit, I think it was like Thursday, but it was, I don't know what the hell to call it, but let's just call it a talk.
I'm super interested now, bro. Can't leave me hanging like that.
No. I don't know what the fuck to call it. It's everyone gathered, the person on stage giving a little performance talk about like moving forward in business. It was just a presentation,
like a A keynote presentation?
Yeah, something like that, right? I just
Okay.
forgot the word.
All
Like
right.
my brain went blank for a second, but they were literally giving a talk. And this person was like, hey, I know this individual, right, who is said billionaire. This person is 70 years old. They've been waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning, going to sleep at 11 o'clock at night every single day for the past like 40 years. And I was like, holy shit, man. Like, I don't know anybody that's done that for like 3 weeks in a row, right? Right. So the thing that I was thinking about is what are those actions? Like, what are the things that I need to set in place to make sure that the things that I achieve happen? Because when you think about it, right, we have spurts in life where we're focused, we have spurts in life where we grow, and those focus and growth usually happen correlated to one another to a certain extent, right? You live a life a certain way, and you get a result because of that. So the thing that I was actually thinking about more directly is what does that need to be now? Right? It does
Mm,
come with the 5-year plan. It does come with the whys and the why I need to put behind it. But the thing that I need to do is like, what are my daily actions? What are my standards? What's my minimum that I need to do to get to this level and stay at this level? What is that minimum performance? Not the maximum, because that's like I need to be able to set the
it's
bar
unrealistic.
to a
If you
certain
try to create,
level
yeah.
and
Sorry.
maintain that, right? Like this is the minimum bar that I have. If I fall under here, I start to lose quality of life. I start to lose quality of sleep. I start to lose mental health, right? What's that? Like I cannot fall below this. I need to set that. Anything under here is unacceptable to me as an individual, right? Those are the standards that I need to set. Those are standards that I was talking about. And this is kind of where it came from. It's like everyone that gets to a certain point has a thing that they do every single day. Some people are not willing to do that. Some people are willing to do that. What the fuck are those for me? And I need to sit down and I need to think about it, right? Again, it's not something that I've gotten there. It's not something that I've set in stone for the rest of my life, right? There was a portion, there was a plan, there was a thing that worked for an extended period of time, and it got me to where I am here. Now that's different. Right. When I was working at Advance and I was getting my real estate license and I was trying to study for that stuff, I was waking up at like 4:30 in the morning because I didn't have time to go to the gym. So I'd have to wake up early to do some exercises, stretches and shit like that in the morning to go work all day and then come home and, watch some TV, relax and go to sleep, because I was literally in the building 12 hours a day or 10 hours a day. I couldn't do that. Right. That doesn't work anymore. Like I can wake up at 4:30 if I want to, but that's not going to do me any good. I have time to go to the gym. I have time. Like literally, if I just wake up at 4:30, I'm losing sleep pointlessly, right? So that plan, those actions, those things that I did to get myself to where I am now no longer work. I need to rediscover. I need to figure out what that thing is from here forward and set a baseline for myself.
Um, I wrote a couple of things down, trying to how to map this out, almost kind of like a old school Venn diagram from back in the day. I'll give you an alternative point of view, just to play devil's advocate for a second, only because I ask myself those same questions, and I'm not saying that. There's also a key word that we haven't said quite yet that I think you got to figure out. I think you got to figure out what level of discipline needs to go into those items, and what level of discipline are you willing to give or forgive in terms of your overall expectation. But let me tell you this. Like, I think as somebody who's followed success, followed podcasts, read books, asked a lot of questions about other people, successful CEOs, head coaches, NFL, NBA, shit like that. You're trying to emulate somebody. You're trying to find out what they're doing, whether it's waking up early, whether it's staying up late, whether it's waking up at the same time every single day. Like there are common themes that people have that are successful that they follow. But there are also, but because we're so obsessed with success, we're looking to emulate what other people are doing, that we also forget to give a question or another point of view to those who have been hyper successful, who have not had the 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. trends, or, hey, I run every day for the past 40 years, rain or shine, pain or not, whatever their crutch is specifically that they fall on to support their discipline. There are just as many people who are hyper successful that don't wake up every morning at 6 a.m.
No, I get that. And I fully understand that. And that's not what I'm saying. That's just the example that I use, which is why I said, what are
Okay.
my standards, right? I need to figure out what that is for me. It may not be that, but I still need to figure out what that is, right? If that's what it ends up being, that's fine. But I still need to figure it out. I can't see that from here.
All right, I'm going to go through it real fast just because I'm painting a picture. All right. So I got discipline. I already got the circle for expectations, right? So expectations, you're trying to figure that out. All right. Then I have non-negotiables, consistency, discipline, and actions, right? So like we covered all those key words, but like you got to figure out your baseline expectations or your line in the sand of what you're expecting in the next 5 years. And I think you already said that and equated that just for the group. That's how I'm putting it in my head. Because the only word we didn't talk about, because we talked about everything else, was just the discipline piece. Like what level of discipline are you looking to give to get where you want to go, right? And I think for me, discipline comes at physical things, but it also comes at a mental cost as well, right?
It does. The question that I have around discipline is simply what level will it take, right? Because I got to figure that out too, right? You can't just say like, yeah, I'll be disciplined, but you have to figure out how, right? What is
that's where I was actually trying to say that. And so thank you. You like filled that right in, was like, what level of discipline is going to be required to make it to where I need to get it? Because you don't want to put in, to your point, you don't want to put in maximum effort, because maximum effort is going to come at a huge cost of your mental health, physical health, relationships, stuff like that. So, but you can't have the bare minimum of discipline. So you got to find that sweet spot of like, what am I willing to draw a line in the sand on? Because I think here's my topic for men, just men in general. Because my wife and I debate around this, and it's a common marriage topic of conversation, I think, is like, you and we as men have to find that line in the sand of discipline to figure out how far we're willing to go to reach the goals that we want to reach, right? And that's the question that we all have to figure, and each one of us pay the price of that question and decision for ourselves. And some pay a heavier price than others, right? So like, I think I've tried and done a better job at disciplining myself to a certain extent to also still have a quality of life, because you could discipline yourself further and make it farther, but it comes at a cost of being unhappy with no family, right? No friends. So, and that's not to say like, I would never say that I want more success and that people are standing in my way, because that's a different topic of conversation. But like, hey, I want to balance having a fantastic family, a great quality of life, but also balance hyper success as a man, as an individual, right? Just how I'm wired. I've been very competitive my entire life. I've been in sports my entire life, and everything I've done passionately and deeply, like I've always been competitive. So like, you have to figure out where that's going to take you and what you're willing to sacrifice in order to get there, right? And still being tolerant of other things. That's a question that you'll never stop answering. You'll never stop asking it, and you'll never stop answering it until you're just done in general, and you're like retired and you're chillaxing.
Dude, the other question for other people about discipline also is like, you do have to realize that there's another level to whatever it is that you think you're willing to do right now.
Mm-hmm. You know what? There was I wrote one other thing down that I've been coming across. I think we've talked about this on 2 other episodes. But the magic begins in the work that you are avoiding. Right. So I use that quote to kind of tie into what you just said, is like, what else can be done? And there's a lot of things that we don't take, but then that goes back to taking action. There's a lot of things that we just don't do right now because we're not in the right space to do it. We're just not there. We're not putting our energy there. So we avoid it. But then one day in two months, we may be interested in asking that question now, because other things externally are not impacting that internal thought process as well. I don't know.
Do you, my friend, have any final thoughts?
No, I think I landed mine. I think the middle of the conversation has got to be expectations. And then the other things that you have to question are the actions that you're willing to take, the non-negotiables that you're giving yourself, the discipline that's required, right? And the consistency that's needed. That's all I got.